Previously, on One Last Kiss, Eleanor watched from the front parlor as the guests arrived for Priscilla's party. She noticed that she didn't recognize anyone from the village, and she saw that everyone was dressed the same. The men wore black cloaks over crisp white shirts, and the women wore black cloaks over black gowns. Priscilla stepped up beside Eleanor as she watched the guests arrive. Priscilla says that vampires are all the rave in Paris. That's why everyone is all dressed the same. Eleanor asks whether or not she believes in vampires. Priscilla tells her no. She asks her if she's seen Trevor. Priscilla tells her no and says that Trevor is not fond of parties. Eleanor had wanted nothing more than to attend this party a week ago. Now she wished that particular dream had not come true. During the party, Eleanor met a tall, dark stranger. He talked to her about vampires and told her a story about how they will tear the heart from a victim's chest. Then they will roast it on an open fire and feed it to their lover to bind them forever. Eleanor begins to feel uncomfortable with the conversation and makes her way to the balcony outside. As she takes in the cool night air, Trevor suddenly appears from the shadows. Eleanor tells him that the party is not at all what she expected. Then Trevor presented her with a flower that he managed to find. It somehow survived the coming winter. He told her that he would never be able to pick flowers with her on a sunny day. He leads her back inside and they begin to dance. As the dance comes to an end, Trevor tells Eleanor that he must go feed and leaves the party shortly after. Eleanor eventually comes across the tall stranger from earlier and tries to avoid him this time. But as she enters the foyer, she trips over something on the floor. It's a dead body, the body of the carriage driver, Ben, and he has a gaping hole in his chest. His heart was missing. Eleanor's horrified scream drew in a crowd of guests. They watched with eager eyes as if they were ready to pounce on her. Suddenly, Eleanor heard footsteps and the crowd parted as Trevor ran up beside her. Priscilla followed right behind him. When they noticed the dead body, they both showed their anger towards the guests, assuming it was one of them that had killed Ben. Trevor and Priscilla both told everyone to leave and ended the party. After all the guests were gone, Trevor began to question Priscilla, wanting to find out exactly who had killed Ben. Priscilla says she doesn't know, and that she's shocked by the whole incident. Trevor no longer feels that Eleanor is safe at Fear Manor. Priscilla tells him not to worry, that Eleanor is still safe, and she promises Trevor that she would find Ben's killer and make them pay. Later that night, Eleanor was heading to her room, but when she passed by Trevor's room, she noticed something in a heap lying on the floor. She picked it up and discovered it was Trevor's shirt, and it was covered in blood. Eleanor thought back to the story she heard from the man at the party. Then she remembered that Trevor was late to the party. Could Trevor have been the one that killed Ben? Did he do it to bind him and Eleanor? She realized that Trevor was right. She wasn't safe anymore. Eleanor needed to get away so she could think. She decided to go out into the woods and look for Trevor. When she finds him, he's feasting on a wood rat. Eleanor asks him about the bloody shirt. Trevor assures her that he hasn't fed on anyone since he tasted the miller's blood. Eventually, a light snow begins to fall, and Trevor took Eleanor back to the manor. He took her around back and led her into the kitchen. He tells her that he's going out to do more hunting. Since he doesn't feed on humans, he requires more animal blood. After he leaves, Eleanor notices something in the oven as she walks by. She looks inside to see a heart resting on the coals. She then realizes that she has to get away, and she needs to leave without Trevor knowing. The next morning she decides to say goodbye to Annie first. Then she'll go to her father's house and grab a few things, and then head over the bridge and make her way to the next closest town. That afternoon, when Eleanor arrives at Mr. Dobbin's, she finds out that Annie has gone missing. Dobbin tells her that Annie ran away, but Eleanor knows that she wouldn't have done that. She tells him that something must have happened to Annie. Eleanor decided to go look for her. She goes to all the houses and shops in the village, but no one has seen Annie. As it gets darker, Eleanor borrows a lantern from the blacksmith and headed towards the woods to continue her search. She eventually makes her way to the river. Frozen blocks of ice float around near the riverbed. When she gets to the bridge, she notices a large chunk of ice that didn't bob and float like the others. She holds up the lantern and discovers a woman frozen in the ice. She grabs a rock and starts trying to break the ice apart. Suddenly, a hand grabs her shoulder from behind. It's Trevor. He tells her that it's too dangerous for her to be outside this late. He tries to take her back home, but she refuses to leave until she finds out who was frozen in the ice. Trevor reluctantly helps her. Together, they freed the woman from the ice, but Eleanor is horrified to see that it's Annie. She tells Trevor that she doesn't want to leave her body. Trevor picks up the body and leads Eleanor through the woods to a secluded cottage. He takes them inside and starts up a fire. Trevor tells Eleanor that Dawn will be here soon. He tells her to wait there, and he will send someone with a carriage to take her back to the manor. Then, Trevor leaves Eleanor with Annie's body at the cottage. While she waited, Eleanor looked at Annie and thought of the times they had shared together. As she looked at Annie, she noticed 2 small punctures in Annie's neck. She brushes her hair aside to get a closer look, but when she does, Annie's eyes shoot open. She grabs Eleanor and digs her nails into her arm. She opened her mouth to reveal sharp-pointed fangs. Then, Annie lunges for Eleanor's throat. Chapter 23. Eleanor jerked free of Annie's hold and scrambled back. "Annie! Annie, it's me, Eleanor!" she cried. "I know who you are," Annie said. She spread her lips into a grisly smile. Pointed fangs pressed into her lower lip. "I am hungry, Eleanor. I need your help." Eleanor worked her way to her feet. Her heart was pounding. Her legs felt weak. "I want to help you," Eleanor said. She looked around the cottage frantically. "But there's no food here." "You're wrong," Annie said. Her eyes were fixed on Eleanor's throat. "There's plenty of food. You have only to give it to me." Eleanor shook her head. "I won't give you my blood." "Are we no longer friends?" Annie asked. She almost sounded like her old self. "I would do anything for you, Ellie. I will give you immortality." Eleanor shook her head. "No, I don't want that." Annie smiled. "There is no better gift. Truly it is best for both of us. I am so hungry, and you will become immortal. Think, Eleanor. You will never have to worry about money or where to live. I shall never have to fear old Dobbin or any man. We shall never age or grow ugly." Eleanor backed away as Annie edged closer to her. "Vampirism is not death, Eleanor. It is being reborn. It is freedom." "It is a sickness," Eleanor said, thinking of all Trevor had told her. "And a torment." Something that might have been regret flickered in Annie's glowing eyes. "See it how you will," she said. "But if it's not me, one of the others will get you. They are everywhere. Sooner or later, one of our kind will dig their fangs into your pretty neck. Why not let it be me? I won't hurt you." "I don't believe this," Eleanor thought. "She is politely asking to murder me, and talks as though there is nothing wrong with it." She shook her head. "No, stay away from me." "I can't do that, Ellie," Annie growled. "I must feed." She lunged at Eleanor. Eleanor grunted as Annie's body slammed into hers. She tottered and then fell to the hard dirt floor. Annie fell on top of her, knocking the breath out of her. Annie grabbed Eleanor's hair, lifted her head, and pounded it against the floor. Blinding pain burst through Eleanor's head. Darkness wavered at the corner of her eyes. Dimly, she saw Annie's glowing eyes grow nearer. Then she felt Annie's icy breath skim along her neck. She felt the hard edge of Annie's teeth. "No!" Eleanor cried. She bucked hard beneath Annie's body. Annie lost her balance and fell to the floor. Eleanor rolled away. She struggled to her feet. She had to get outside. She had to escape. She rushed to the door. She grabbed the bar and tried to lift it, but it did not budge. It was stuck. She heard a shriek behind her. She spun around. Annie leapt toward her, her eyes ablaze with hunger and greed. Eleanor ducked to the side. Annie hurtled past her and hit the door. Eleanor heard wood splinter. Then Annie turned on her, her hands raised like claws. "Come to me, Eleanor. Give me your blood." "Never!" Eleanor cried. She was growing tired. She knew she couldn't outlast Annie. She needed a weapon. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw a poker near the fire. She darted for it. Annie grabbed her and hurled her against the wall. Eleanor hit with a solid bang. The sound rang through her ears. Blackness eased in around her. "I won't give in to the darkness," Eleanor thought. "I won't let Annie win." She felt her legs giving out beneath her. She began to slide down the wall. Groping blindly, she grabbed the curtains. She heard them rip as her weight carried them down. Shafts of sunlight pierced the cottage. Eleanor heard a blood-curdling scream. In muted horror, she watched Annie stagger back. Eleanor watched Annie's skin begin to smoke. Then it bubbled like boiled water. Within seconds, her body was a mass of reddened blisters. Annie screamed in agony as her blistered skin began to burst. The skin on her face, the skin on her neck, the skin on her arms. It burst open, leaving gaping black holes, holes that bubbled and burst until nothing remained, nothing but bone. "Annie!" Eleanor cried. But there was nothing she could do but watch her friend die, a second, slow, agonizing death. Chapter 24. Eleanor stared at Annie's grisly face. The skin had shriveled away, burned to a crisp. Black hollow eye sockets stared out at her. Her mouth was locked in a haunting smile, revealing blackened fangs. Eleanor sank to the floor. She rubbed her throat. Annie had been her friend, but her need for blood had been too great. She would have killed and fed on me, Eleanor realized, with no regrets. Eleanor felt her entire body quaking with exhaustion. Then she heard someone yell her name. The sun had risen. She was safe. She rushed outside. A young man with a thatch of blonde hair brought the sleigh to a halt. He hopped out of the driver's seat. "Are you all right, Miss Rollins?" he asked, concern in his voice. "I'm Henry, the Fear's new driver." Trembling violently, Eleanor nodded. She could not help but remember what happened to the last driver. "I'm just cold," she said. Henry helped her into the sleigh and wrapped several blankets around her. "Mr. Fear had an emergency and sent me to bring you back to the manor. The snow's thick, but it shouldn't take us too long," he told her. She watched him climb into the sleigh. He slapped the reins over the horses' backs. Eleanor glanced toward the sun burning in the late morning sky. She knew what Trevor's emergency was. He could not risk exposing himself to the sun. She had seen what it did to Annie. She could not bear the thought of Trevor suffering the same agony. Late that afternoon, Eleanor awoke in her room. She had fallen asleep after Henry brought her back to the manor. She still knew she had to get away, but it was clear that she could not leave Shadow Glen while the storm outside was still raging. And truthfully, she was glad to have another chance to see Trevor. She bathed and changed into fresh clothing. Then she went straight to Trevor's study. The drapes were drawn, but she knew the sun waited on the other side. She went to the bookcase and tugged on the book that released the hidden door. It opened with a slight creak. She glanced over her shoulder. With a deep breath, she stepped into the dark entryway. Her candle sputtered. This time, she knew what she would find at the end of the journey. Still, it made her skin crawl to follow the eerie passageway that smelled of death. The cold ate at her as she made her way to the room at the far end. The light from the candle glowed on the wooden coffin. She had to talk with Trevor, to tell him about Annie. Her father, Ben, and now Annie had all been murdered in the space of a few days. Annie's death made it certain that the murders were the work of a vampire. "I know Trevor had nothing to do with the deaths," Eleanor told herself. "So he must help me find out who was responsible, and stop them." Slowly, she approached the pine coffin. Even though she knew Trevor lay inside, it still frightened her to lift the lid, to see him look so lifeless. To realize once again that however much she loved him, he would never be a mortal man. He was one of the undead. Slowly, she lifted the lid on the coffin and peered inside. She gasped, unwilling to believe her eyes. Slowly, she reached her hand inside the coffin to make sure. No, she wasn't imagining it. Trevor's coffin was empty. Chapter 25. "What on earth are you doing?" Eleanor spun around at the sound of Priscilla's voice. Priscilla stood in the arched doorway, surrounded by shadows. I can't tell her that her cousin is a vampire, Eleanor realized. I can't tell her anything. Priscilla stepped farther into the room. "What is this place?" she asked. Eleanor was at a loss for words. She had never lied in her life. "I don't know," she said. "My father told me that lots of old houses were built with secret tunnels and rooms." Priscilla's eyes widened with alarm. "Do you think the original owners of this house were smugglers?" "I'm not sure," Eleanor confessed. She was relieved that Priscilla had not yet noticed the coffin. Priscilla rubbed her arms. "It gives me chills just to think about it." "We should probably leave before we catch a chill and get sick," Eleanor said. She followed Priscilla to Trevor's study. "I'm not certain where Trevor is," she told Priscilla. Priscilla looked surprised. "I wasn't looking for Trevor. I was looking for you. I was hoping you could help me alter this gown. This skirt is just a bit too long." Eleanor noticed that the drapes in the study had been drawn aside. Darkness had descended. Eleanor hoped Trevor would soon return. She needed to know he was safe. In the meantime, she was glad for the chance to help Priscilla. It would be a tiny repayment for all Priscilla had done for her. She followed Priscilla to her room. The room was large and luxurious. A four-poster bed draped in golden silk stood in the center. A fire burned brightly in the hearth. A large oval mirror was placed beside the bed. Priscilla stepped onto a small stool covered in needlepoint. Eleanor found a pincushion in Priscilla's sewing box. Kneeling beside Priscilla, Eleanor carefully began to mark the hem. Eleanor tried to calm her nerves, but she could not help listening for Trevor's return home. Her mind drifted to her confrontation with Annie. Had Trevor known Annie was a vampire? Why wasn't he in his coffin? Had something happened to him? Eleanor put a last straight pin in the silk brocade. She sat back and surveyed Priscilla's gown. There, that should do it, she said. Look in the mirror and tell me if the hem is even. Priscilla slanted her head slightly. You look and tell me what you think. Standing beside Priscilla, Eleanor looked in the mirror. The only reflection she saw was her own. Chapter 26. Eleanor jerked her head around. Priscilla stood on the small stool, perfectly composed. Eleanor darted another panicked look in the mirror. She saw only one reflection, and it was hers. Eleanor scrambled back, staring at Priscilla. Priscilla's eyes darkened and she smiled. Her smile revealed two glistening white fangs. You're a vampire, Eleanor stammered. Priscilla's laughter echoed through the room. Of course. Why do you think you only saw me at night? I thought you liked to go to parties, so you slept all day. Why hadn't Trevor told her? Why had he kept so many secrets from her? I do like parties, Priscilla admitted, but I like blood even more. She stepped down off the stool and walked toward Eleanor. Eleanor backed up a step, but Priscilla kept moving toward her. Eleanor stepped to the side. Not again, she thought. I can't fight another vampire. But she knew she had no choice. It was night. The sun would not save her this time. Eleanor, you do not know my power or my strength, Priscilla warned her. Do not fight me, for it is useless. Besides, you were meant to be one of us. No, Eleanor said. Never. I'll never be like you. You already are. More than you realize. With a wild rush, Priscilla crossed the room. Eleanor evaded her by scrambling over the bed. She hurried for the door and flung it open. Priscilla's laughter chased after her. Eleanor scurried down the stairs and rushed out of the house. The darkness surrounded her. The cold wrapped itself around her. She had to escape. She had to get into town where she could find someone to help her. She heard a rustle of wings above her. She glanced over her shoulder. The moonlight revealed a dark shape swooping down from the sky. Wings spread wide, mouth open to reveal fangs that glistened in the moonlight. The shadowy figure was heading downward, toward the ground. With a purpose to its flight, it was headed straight for her. Eleanor started to run. Faster, faster. Her breath came in great gasps. The frigid air burned deep within her lungs. Her chest ached. She stumbled, then tripped and fell on the icy ground. Her legs twisted with spasms of agony. She couldn't make them work, couldn't force herself to her feet. She couldn't run anymore. She heard the thunderous beating of wings. With terror riveting her to the spot, she glanced up. The looming figure swooped down. Eleanor screamed as it snatched her up off the ground. "Let me go!" she screamed. The creature held her in a grip of steel. The ground rushed beneath her. The cold air bit into her lungs. Higher and higher, it carried her. They circled above the treetops. Then it carried her to the roof of the house and set her down. Her legs were quivering and shaking, but to her surprise, Eleanor found that they held her up. She was standing beside the chimney. The brick shielded her from the gusts of wind. And then she saw that the winged figure wasn't a creature. It was Trevor. Trevor spread his cape wide, protecting her from the cold. "Are you all right?" he asked, an urgency in his voice. She stared at him. He had flown. He had carried her here as though it were a normal thing to do, and as though she would be glad to see him. "Priscilla is a vampire," Eleanor said accusingly. "And Annie was one." Anger blazed in her eyes. You turned them into vampires." "I did nothing of the sort," he assured her. "You didn't sleep in your coffin today," she said, but her voice carried a question. "No, I didn't. I returned to the stables as the sun streaked across the land. I couldn't get to the house in time. I huddled in a dark corner all day." "If you didn't kill Annie, then who did?" Eleanor demanded. "Priscilla," he replied on a weary sigh. "Why didn't you tell me she was a vampire?" "I was trying to protect you. As long as her secret was safe, she promised me that she wouldn't harm you," he explained. "But she hurt others," Eleanor said. "Yes," his voice barely audible. "Did she kill my father?" "Yes, she kills every night. She has done so for years." A hot, ferocious rage surged through Eleanor. She had liked Priscilla, admired her, trusted her, and Priscilla had killed the two people she loved most. There was only one thing to do. "I have to kill your cousin," Eleanor told Trevor in a flat, emotionless voice. "I'm not sure how, but I'll find a way to draw her into the sun, or I'll drive a wooden stake through her heart. But I will kill her." "Eleanor," Trevor said, "you can't kill Priscilla. She is not really my cousin. She is your mother." Chapter 27. "She is your mother." Trevor's words reverberated through Eleanor's mind and heart as though they traveled through a darkened tunnel where the echo never ended. "She is your mother." Her heart pounding out a steady beat of denial, Eleanor glared at Trevor. "You're lying," she said through clenched teeth. Anger flowed through her like a molten river. "You're lying. My mother died when I was an infant." "Yes, she died. A vampire killed her just as one killed me. And then he held the goblet of vampire blood to her lips, and she drank greedily, welcoming the life he offered her." Shaking her head, Eleanor stepped back. "My mother would never do that." "Your mother relished the power she gained. She became strong and cunning, until she became queen of her own colony. You met those who serve her at the winter ball," he told her. "No," Eleanor said. His words cut through her like a knife blade. "Yes, they are all vampires. There to entertain her, and to meet you since you would become their newest kin," he said. "My father would have told me if she were a vampire," Eleanor whispered hoarsely. "He would have told me." "Who do you think he was running from, Eleanor? Why do you think the vampires were after you? Because your mother wants her child back. She wants you with her for eternity." Eleanor felt as though the wind were knocked out of her. There was a sick, hollow feeling in her stomach, and everything inside her ached. "But my mother lived here in Shadow Glen," Eleanor tried. "If Priscilla were my mother, someone would have recognized her." Trevor shook his head. "She changed her name when she became a vampire, and she lived only at night. The people she had known before weren't the kind to be invited to midnight balls, especially those hosted by vampires. And she stayed young and beautiful while they aged. Memories faded. Soon your mother was forgotten." Eleanor thought of how her mother's only portrait had been destroyed. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked Trevor. "Because you were safe only as long as you didn't know. It was Priscilla's game, her rules. She waited all these years for you to grow up. She took away everyone that you cared about so that the loneliness would drive you to us. I tried to warn your father." "She killed him," Eleanor rasped, knowing the words were true even as she spoke them. "Yes," he admitted wearily. Eleanor turned away from him. She could not bear to watch Trevor lie to her. "You welcomed her into your home," Eleanor said. "How could you do that, knowing what she was, knowing she killed my father?" "She gave me no choice," Trevor answered. "As long as I obeyed Priscilla's every command, she forbid the others to harm you. No one else could attack you. No one else could drain the blood from your body." Eleanor whirled to face him. "No one except Annie?" "That was a mistake," Trevor said. "Annie was supposed to remain in the river until the spring thaw. Priscilla did not know we would rescue her, and I did not know that Priscilla had already fed on Annie and turned her into one of the living dead." "So my mother was keeping me safe," Eleanor said. "From everyone but me," Trevor finished. "Drinking your blood, turning you into one of us, that honor was to be mine." Tears stung Eleanor's eyes. She touched her neck and felt the pulse beating at her throat. "You were going to take my blood?" He shook his head wildly and grabbed her arms, giving her a shake. "No, but I knew of no other way to protect you. So I lied. I agreed to play Priscilla's game, hoping to find a way to destroy her before she realized I would never turn you into the hideous creature I am." Eleanor touched her trembling fingers to his pale cheek. "You are not hideous." "I hate what I am," he ground out through clenched teeth. "I love you, Eleanor, but I can never be a proper husband to you. I can never feel the sun warm on my face or watch it shine on yours. I am condemned to the darkness and the cold, and I loathe them both." "How touching," a soft voice said. Eleanor spun around. Priscilla stood beside the chimney, her cloak billowing around her. Eleanor thought of all the times she had wished her mother never died. Even though she held no memories of her mother, she still loved her, or had until this moment. The blue of Priscilla's eyes darkened. Her lips turned as bright red as fresh blood. Her smile revealed pointed fangs. Eleanor felt her stomach lurch as Priscilla took a step toward her. "Trevor has never appreciated all the wonders of immortality," Priscilla murmured. "I don't see that there are any," Eleanor snapped. "Think about it, Eleanor," Priscilla said in a hypnotic voice. "You will live forever. Everyone around you will wither and die while you remain as you are. Together, daughter, we shall rule the night." Eleanor cringed. "I am not your daughter. My mother died. You are some disgusting creature." Priscilla leaped forward and hissed, her eyes growing wide. She seemed part wildcat, part serpent, a monster words could not describe. Eleanor inched back. "Watch what you say, daughter," her mother growled. "I have the power to take your blood without returning life to you." "Let her go, Priscilla," Trevor pleaded. "An unwilling vampire is of no use to you." "How kind of you to be so thoughtful," Priscilla said. With one hand she reached out and gently caressed Trevor's shoulder. Eleanor watched in horror as Trevor squeezed his eyes shut and doubled over in pain. His legs buckled beneath him, and he fell to his knees. "Trevor, what did she do to you?" Eleanor cried. She rushed to his side. She heard Priscilla's triumphant laugh. "Take note, child. That is simply a mild punishment for an unwilling vampire." Priscilla turned to Trevor. With one finger beneath his arm, she lifted him to his feet. "But I shall not destroy you," she told him. "You have served me well. It is time I rewarded you." She released her hold on him and turned to face Eleanor. Eleanor's gaze met her mother's cold, hard eyes. Her mother. Even now she could not, would not, believe this creature was her mother. "Trevor loves you," Priscilla said knowingly. "You make him happy, Eleanor. Ease the loneliness that eats at him night and day." Priscilla held out her hand, palm out. "Join us, my daughter." Eleanor saw Trevor struggle to his feet. "I won't let you hurt her," he yelled, and lunged for Priscilla. Eleanor gasped. Priscilla reached out and ran a gentle hand along the side of Trevor's arm, and Trevor slammed against the edge of the chimney and slumped forward like a discarded rag doll. "He is so weak," Priscilla murmured. "He only drinks the blood of animals, rodents and furry creatures. It's disgusting." "It's more disgusting to drink human blood," Eleanor retorted as she took another step toward Trevor. Priscilla moved quickly in front of her, barring her way. "Human blood gives us strength. Annie's blood was particularly satisfying." Eleanor felt her own blood drain from her face. "Why didn't you take my father's blood?" "I wanted to. I wanted the three of us to be a family again. But he thought me hideous, and he kept hiding you from me. So I killed him, in the same way that he would have killed me if he had found me first." "He loved you," Eleanor said. "I loved you. Now I loathe you." "But I still love you, Eleanor," Priscilla said sweetly. "You are my daughter." She took a step toward Eleanor. Eleanor glanced up. There was nothing above her but the graying sky. "I waited years for you to grow up," Priscilla added, "so that you could knowingly join us. And Trevor promised to do the honors. It would have been so perfect. After all, doesn't every mother long to see her daughter become a bride?" Eleanor shivered at Priscilla's hideous parody of a mother's smile. "'Tis a pity Trevor has gone and ruined all my lovely plans," Priscilla fretted. "But no matter. Perhaps immortality is a gift only a mother should convey to her child." Eleanor looked down. There was nothing but the slanted roof, and beyond that, 3 flights to the ground. "I waited patiently for the right moment to give you immortality, and the moment has come because now you know the truth." Priscilla came closer. Eleanor's gaze darted all around. She could see no escape, no way down. She was trapped. "You know what I am," Priscilla goaded, "and what you will become." Chapter 28. Priscilla lunged forward, her arms outstretched. Her powerful, frigid fingers closed around Eleanor's slender throat. Eleanor struggled to draw in a breath, but her mother's grip was like a vice, solid, unyielding, blocking the flow of air. Eleanor felt her blood throbbing at her temples. She heard her heart pounding between her ears. Her mother's eyes glowed in the waning moonlight. Her pointed fangs shone brightly against the night sky. Eleanor saw the glistening saliva slowly drip from the sharp tips. Her mother opened her mouth wider. Darkness closed in around the edges of Eleanor's vision. Her knees trembled and grew weak. Soon I'll pass out, she realized frantically. And when I awaken, I'll crave blood, and I'll drink from the goblet and become a creature of the night. Her mother leaned close. Eleanor smelled her fetid breath, tainted with the stench of old blood, sucked from other victims. With her last bit of strength, Eleanor shoved hard against her mother. Caught by surprise, Priscilla stumbled back and released Eleanor. Her arms waving wildly in the air like a windmill, she teetered on the edge of the roof. Without thinking, Eleanor kicked wildly at her mother's body. She felt her foot connect with the vampire's legs. Then Priscilla tumbled over the edge. Eleanor heard an ear-splitting scream rip through the night. "Help me! Eleanor! Help me!" Priscilla cried. Cautiously, Eleanor made her way to the brink of the roof. She peered over the edge. Priscilla glared up at her, her arms and legs kicking into the air. A sharp-pointed black spire pierced Priscilla's chest, but no blood flowed from its center. It was not a wooden stake. It was wrought iron. It would not kill her. With a furious scream, Priscilla wrapped her hands around the spire and began to pull her body up, lifting it from the metal spike. "You are my daughter," Priscilla cried. "You must help me when I call." "No," Eleanor whispered. "No!" She whirled around and scrambled across the rooftop where Trevor lay slumped. She shook his shoulders. "Trevor!" He moaned slightly, rolling his head from side to side. She shook him harder. "Trevor, please wake up." His eyes snapped open. Frantically, he glanced around. "Where's Priscilla?" "She fell onto one of the spires. She's dangling there, but she's working her way free." He jerked his head around. Eleanor followed his gaze toward the horizon. "If only she wouldn't free herself before the sun came up," he murmured. "If only the sun would destroy her." "But what about her colony?" Eleanor asked. "What about those who follow her?" "They would leave," Trevor answered. "They are only here because she demanded it, because she came for you. They are all weak. Without her, they would drift away." He cupped her cheek. "You will be safe only if she dies." Eleanor heard Priscilla's frustrated scream. Her eyes returned to Trevor. "I don't know how to get down." "I'll take you," he said, but his voice sounded broken. Eleanor wondered how much strength he had left. Trevor staggered to his feet and slipped his arm around her. Then his gaze captured hers. "No matter what happens, remember two things. I have always hated what I became, and I will always love you." He touched his lips to hers. She felt the coolness of his lips, the desperation, the love. He lifted his mouth from hers, and holding her tightly against his side, he swooped down from the roof. Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut as the ground came closer, and closer, and closer. She didn't realize she was holding her breath until her feet touched the ground and she breathed a sigh of relief. She felt Trevor grab her hand. "Run!" he yelled. "Where are we going?" she asked breathlessly, running after him. "To find the sun." She dug her heels, forcing him to stop. "What do you mean?" she asked. "The sun will be up soon. If we can find a place with no shadows and Priscilla follows, we can force her into the sunlight." Eleanor listened to his plan with a sickening sense of dread. She shook her head. "But you'll die too." She saw the acceptance in the shadowy depths of his eyes. "I'll try to find shelter while you lure her into the sun." Her heart beat faster. With no leaves on the trees, there would be no cool shade, nowhere he could escape the sunlight. "Find shelter now," she pleaded. "I won't leave you to face her alone," he vowed. An ear-splitting shriek echoed around them. Eleanor glanced up to see Priscilla soaring through the air. Trevor grabbed her hand and tugged hard. "Come on," he yelled. They began running. Priscilla's laughter followed them. Eleanor looked toward the sky. It was growing light, turning from black to charcoal gray. Gradually, the sun began to ease over the horizon. Without warning, Eleanor felt a hard push against her back. Priscilla. Eleanor and Trevor went sprawling over the ground, rocks scraping her knees and palms, dirt spraying her face. Choking and coughing, Eleanor rolled over. She glanced to the side and saw Trevor roll onto his back. "Over here!" Eleanor called. There was a stand of trees just behind her. She was too late. Before Trevor could get back to his feet, Priscilla attacked. She leaped on him like a wolf leaping on a deer. She straddled his chest and gently stroked his cheek. Trevor winced as streaks of blood rose beneath her fingertips, as though she had gouged him with her nails. "It's time that we parted ways, Trevor," Priscilla told him. "I shall miss you." She glared up at Eleanor. "It's a shame you won't have time to kiss your love farewell." Moving so swiftly that the motion was blurred, Priscilla raised her arms and plunged a sharpened wooden stake through Trevor's heart. Eleanor screamed at the same moment that Trevor released a blood-curdling cry. Priscilla jumped off him and began skipping around his contorting body. "Die, Trevor. It's what you have craved for so long. Death." Eleanor crawled across the ground and wrapped both hands around the wooden stake. Blood gushed from Trevor's chest. Deep, red, rich blood. Sobbing, she started to pull out the stake. He laid his trembling hands over hers. "No," he gasped. "It's too late for me." She stopped and stared at him. "Run," he ordered. "I won't leave you," she cried. Tears welled in his eyes, and he smiled. "I feel the sun's warmth again, Eleanor." "The warmth?" Priscilla mocked him. "You'll only feel it for a little while, Trevor, and then you'll be cold again, and dead." "No!" Eleanor shrieked as she leaped off Trevor. She hurled herself against Priscilla. She pounded her fists against her mother's face, her chest, her arms. Priscilla flung her to the ground as easily as a man might brush off a moth. "We'll have to finish this off tonight, daughter," she said. "Now the sun rises, and I must get inside." "No, we'll finish this now," Eleanor cried. "You killed Father, and you killed Annie and Trevor. How many others?" "Too many to count," her mother said. "And soon you will do the same." Eleanor stared at her mother, the queen of the vampires. Priscilla was as beautiful and regal as ever. She spread her cloak wide. Eleanor scrambled to her feet and tore after Priscilla, catching her just as her feet began to leave the ground in flight. She brought her back down. Priscilla landed with a deafening thud. Eleanor straddled her mother's chest and grabbed her wrists, pinning her to the ground. "I just have to hold you for the sun," she said. "The sun will find you, and then I'll be free." Her mother twisted easily to the side. In seconds, it was Eleanor who was flat on her back and Priscilla on top of her. Priscilla grabbed both of Eleanor's wrists in one hand and jerked her arms over her head. Eleanor glared into her mother's flaming red eyes. "You don't scare me," she said. "That doesn't matter," Priscilla told her. "Your fate cannot be changed." She pressed the heel of her hand beneath Eleanor's chin and forced her head back until the pulse at the base of Eleanor's throat beat wildly against her skin. "Welcome to my world," Priscilla growled as she bared her fangs and lowered her head. Eleanor heard an enraged cry. It was Trevor. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw him stagger toward Priscilla, the bloodied end of the stake held high. Priscilla jerked her head around. "No, you can't be alive." "You missed my heart," Trevor rasped. "I won't miss yours." He lunged for her. She deflected the stake, sending it flying into the nearby brush. Eleanor struggled to her knees, gasping for breath. She watched Trevor grab Priscilla's arm. Priscilla screamed and tried to jerk away, but her injury from the spire, though healing rapidly, had weakened her temporarily. Trevor managed to drag her across the clearing, to the spot where the sun was forming a circle of light. "No!" Priscilla screamed. She kicked and ranted, but Trevor hung on tightly, tangling with her, slowing her escape. Eleanor forced herself to her feet. "Trevor!" For 1 second that seemed to last an eternity, he held her gaze, and then he propelled Priscilla and himself into the circle of sunlight. Eleanor glanced up and saw the sun was advancing, a ball of fire burning brightly in the morning sky. It had killed Annie. It would kill Trevor. "Trevor!" she screamed. The first rays of dawn reached out and touched Eleanor's mother. Priscilla shrieked. Her skin began to smoke and bubble. Her beautiful face became a mass of reddened blisters. She screamed as her skin began to burst. Priscilla's screams tore through the dawn and fell into a deafening silence. Eleanor saw Trevor release his hold on Priscilla. He started to stagger out of the circle of light, but Eleanor could see it was too late. His skin was blistering. Froth bubbled out of his mouth. He rolled over and began to crawl across the ground, leaving hunks of skin behind. Tears flooded Eleanor's eyes. She rushed to him, cradling him in her arms. The sun was unmerciful, eating his body away. "I'm warm, Eleanor," he whispered. "At last." She thought she saw him smile. As he drew his last breath, she knew there was something she had to do. With tears streaming down her face, Eleanor leaned over and kissed her warm lips against his for one last kiss. The end.